The rancher stood at the edge of his land every morning, just before the sun rose, the wide plains stretching endlessly before him like a promise never fulfilled. His name was Elias Crowley, a man whose hands had shaped fences, calmed wild horses, and buried dreams with the same quiet strength. The ranch was prosperous, rolling grass, healthy cattle, a sturdy house built from decades of labor. But inside that house lived a silence, heavier than stone. Elias had once imagined children running across the porch, laughter mixing with the wind, a small voice calling him father. Instead, time had passed, love had been buried, and fate had left him alone with his prayers. One morning, believing no one could hear him, Elias whispered to the rising sun, "I wish I had a child." The words broke something open inside him, and he turned away ashamed of the ache that never healed. That same day, miles away near the old Cottonwood riverbank, Ayanna, an Apache woman hardened by survival and softened by wisdom, knelt beside a dying fire. She had lost her people to sickness, broken treaties and cruelty, yet she carried herself not as a victim, but as a woman who understood pain and still chose compassion. She had heard stories of the lonely rancher, how he never turned away the hungry, how he paid fair wages, how grief followed him like a shadow. When fate crossed their paths that afternoon, it did so quietly. Elias found her tending to an injured horse near his boundary fence, her movements calm, respectful, confident. Instead of reaching for his rifle, he watched in silence. When the horse stood again, alive and steady, Ayanna looked at him and said softly, "Your land remembers kindness." Something in her voice felt like home. Elias offered water, then shelter, not charity, respect. Over shared meals, silence slowly learned to speak. Ayanna listened more than she talked, and when she did speak, her words carried weight. She saw the empty chair at the table, the pause in his breath when children rode past the ranch on dusty ponies. One night, as the fire crackled low, Elias finally spoke his truth aloud. "I built all this," he said, voice rough, "but I have no one to leave it to, no child to teach, no future beyond fences." The words trembled with years of restraint. Ayanna did not rush to answer. She moved closer, her eyes steady, and whispered words that would change everything. "Let me help you, rancher." Those words were not a promise of romance, nor a bargain of need. They were an offering of purpose. Ayanna stayed, not as charity, not as possession, but as a partner in work and healing. She helped with the land, the animals, the rhythms Elias had forgotten to enjoy. She taught him that family was not only born, but chosen. And as days passed, the ranch felt alive again. If this story already touches something in you, if you believe healing can come when least expected, remember to subscribe, because stories like this are meant to be carried forward, just like hope itself. The seasons turned, and with them, Elias began to change. He laughed more easily, slept more peacefully, and spoke to the land not with sorrow, but with gratitude. Ayanna brought life into the ranch in ways he never imagined, not through children at first, but through meaning. She organized workers' families to gather, taught forgotten songs to the wind, and reminded Elias that legacy was not only blood, but love poured into others. Yet fate was not finished testing them. When drought came and neighboring ranches turned cruel, Elias was offered wealth in exchange for forcing Ayanna away. He refused without hesitation. "This land was empty before she came," he said. "I won't make it empty again." One night, under a sky crowded with stars, Ayanna revealed her deepest truth. She had once carried a child, lost not to nature but to violence. The pain had nearly destroyed her, but it had also taught her compassion beyond fear. Elias listened, tears carving paths down his weathered face. He did not speak of saving her. He spoke only of standing beside her. Weeks later, children from the nearby settlement began arriving at the ranch. Orphans, runaways, the forgotten. Elias taught them to ride. Ayanna taught them to listen. Slowly, the ranch became something more than property. It became refuge. Years later, when Elias sat on the porch surrounded by children calling him uncle, teacher, father, he remembered the morning he had whispered his wish to the sun. Ayanna stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You wished for a child," she said gently, "but the Creator gave you many." Elias smiled, understanding at last. Family had arrived, not the way he expected, but exactly the way he needed. And if this story reminded you that hope can still find us, even in our loneliest moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this are not just told, they are shared, remembered, and lived. Time softened everything it touched, even wounds that once felt eternal. The ranch no longer woke in silence. Mornings arrived with bare feet on wooden floors, laughter drifting through open windows, and the low music of life moving forward. Elias watched it all from the porch one dawn, his breath catching not from sadness, but from gratitude. He had stopped counting years because time no longer felt like something slipping away. Ayana stood beside him, older now, her hair threaded with silver, her presence as steady as the mountains. Together, they had raised not one child, but many children who arrived broken and left whole, children who learned that strength could be gentle and authority could be kind. Yet fate, as always, asked one final question. Elias fell ill during a hard winter, his body tired from decades of labor and love. As snow wrapped the land in white silence, he feared not death but unfinished words. One night, believing sleep would take him for the last time, he called Ayana close. "I asked for a child," he whispered, voice thin but steady. "You gave me a family, but I never thanked you." Ayana pressed her forehead to his and answered with the calm certainty that had always guided her. "You gave me a place where pain did not decide my future." We saved each other. The children gathered quietly in the doorway, realizing in that moment what legacy truly meant. Elias lived, not because of medicine alone, but because love had given him a reason to stay. When spring returned, so did his strength. Though he walked slower now, watched more than he worked. The ranch passed gently into shared hands, led by those he had taught, protected by values stronger than fences. One evening, as the sun burned gold across the plains, a young boy asked Elias what it meant to be a father. Elias smiled, looking at Ayana, then at the children. "It means choosing to stay," he said, "even when it's hard." Especially then. Years later, after Elias was laid to rest beneath the cottonwood tree, Ayana stood where he once stood, watching the land breathe. She was no longer helping a rancher. She was guiding a legacy. The children, now grown, kept the ranch alive, not just with cattle and crops, but with compassion. Travelers spoke of the place where broken souls were welcomed and healed. And somewhere in the wind, Elias's wish still echoed, not as longing but as fulfillment. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that family can be found, hope can return, and kindness can outlive us all, subscribe to the channel. These stories are not just told for entertainment. They are told to remind us who we can be,